Hello everyone, bringing you a video today taking a look at this. This is something of an introductory video. The reason for this is I don't have a full set of the equipment on the mannequin here. This of course being the Naval 1919 pattern web equipment. As I say, it's not a full set, but because Ian, my friend Ian, very kindly gifted me the pack which is on the mannequin here, and also some, obviously the top part of the rucksack for 1925 pattern, I thought it would be good to do an introductory video looking at each set of equipment. They're quite interesting interwar developments in British web equipment, obviously made for the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force respectively. This is 1919 pattern, which, as I say, was designed for the Royal Navy as a pistol equipment set. Post First World War, the Royal Navy introduced the 1908 pattern web equipment to replace the 1901 pattern leather equipment. Though components of that would be seen in service right the way through until the Second World War, it didn't just disappear from service. But this was an update to that. The 1901 pattern had been designed as both a rifle and a pistol equipment. 1908, of course, did have pistol accoutrements as part of the design, but the Navy, for whatever reason, went forward and wanted a more modern, up-to-date design of web equipment for those men armed with pistols in boarding or landing actions. And this would see service in Hong Kong, China, and basically in interwar Royal Navy landing and boarding operations. And it would see service through the Second World War as well. You see photographs of chaps wearing components of this during the retaking of Hong Kong or the reoccupation of Hong Kong in 1945, after which components would be mixed and matched for a short time with 1937 pattern, which of course had been introduced into Royal Navy service during the Second World War, and then it would phase out of service from then on. Obviously, generally not worn as a full set. You rarely see it worn as a full set, quite often just worn as belt and braces with the pistol accoutrements attached. So we'll get into looking at the various components of this. I'll talk through what's missing as well during the video. As I say, in the future, hopefully, if I do manage to find the bits that are missing, there'll be a proper video on this looking at it in more detail. But I thought it would be good to do at least a brief introduction of this and to talk a little bit about it because it's quite interesting. So obviously, set up here as a pistol set of equipment, we have various components which will be familiar to those who are familiar with British 1937 pattern. Quite a lot of the components are similar. The belt, starting with the belt here, this is obviously the Mills hook and loop buckle, which I've talked about in a separate video, patented in 1919, and I believe this is the first set of equipment it's seen on. We then have the pistol case, or holster, but in official nomenclature is pistol case here, which is designed to take Mark 6 Webley revolver and .455. It's quite an interesting design. It's obviously a webbing holster. Previously, the holsters obviously used with 1908 and so forth were leather. A webbing holster would have a wooden bobbin in the bottom there, rather than a webbing stitched webbing base. And that would change with later productions, would be more similar to 1937 pattern. It doesn't have the upper set of C-hooks to attach into the bottom of a compass or pistol ammunition case, because obviously that's not part of the design. So that's another way of differentiating between these. If you find what ostensibly looks like a 1937 pattern holster, but it's never had the top C-hooks, there's a very good possibility, if it is in tan webbing, that it's a 1919 pattern, a second issue 1919 pattern holster. On the right here we have the pistol ammunition pouch. This obviously is designed to take packets of .455 ammunition, and the belt behind these is supported by brace attachments. Now these are, I believe one is naval marked, the other isn't. The early 1919 pattern brace attachments had a round ring rather than the square one here, where the webbing here joins the upper part with the buckle attached. This was originally a round ring, and in this instance it's square. One of these is 1937 pattern because I only have one naval marked brace attachment. As I say, it's just to bring the set together and complete it. I do have an example of the earlier one, but as I say, we'll have a look at that when I do a video of this in more detail, hopefully when the set is complete. We then have the pack supported using L-straps here. These are not fully detachable, as we'll have a look at in a minute, but the method of attaching them to the web equipment, that is hooking through the top of the brace attachments here, is something which obviously would be carried over to 1937 pattern, so it's interesting there, it's something of a progenitor of that. But this web equipment also pulls in quite a few design details which had been developed in other sets of equipment running up to this. Web equipment sets designed for the Belgian Army, and also web equipment designed for British officers as a private purchase set. and obviously various components that mills already had were kind of lumped together to make this equipment set, and that would then be carried across into the later designs. Obviously the buckle is a really good example of that. This is still used today. So we obviously have the pack supported by these L straps. This is not new to this system, but something which was incorporated in the design, and I believe it's the first issue set of equipment, the first British issue set of equipment to use this system for supporting the pack on the back, which obviously means the pack can be taken off whilst wearing the rest of the equipment, which is something you couldn't do with the 1908 pattern equipment, for example, because it buckles directly onto the braces which support the rest of the equipment. We'll move this round now. We'll have a look at the left hip of the equipment. Not that there's a huge amount to see there, unfortunately, but it just shows the side profile of the pack and the pistol case. Here we have the left-hand side of the equipment, and you can see here the L strap coming down, and then the lower strap from the L strap attached to the bottom of the pack there, using a D-ring. These are not actually removable from the pack. They're attached permanently at bottom and top, and the 2-inch buckle at the top is similar to that used on the 1908 pattern, but the strap is actually stitched onto the pack and just bunches up here when you move it through the buckle to adjust it. So they're permanently attached to the pack, which is a bit slightly different. Obviously the 1937 pattern will perpetuate the removable element of that. You could remove the straps from the pack or the haversack to give it a little bit more interchangeability. This doesn't have that. The L straps are permanently attached onto the pack. You can also see the side straps here, and there's one at the top as well. This allows you, of course, to attach a rolled greatcoat, a rolled blanket, that sort of thing around the outside of the pack. You can also see the side of the holster here. It's perhaps a little easier to see the riveted wooden base in the holster there, the pistol case. As I say, later examples would do away with that and go to a more standard webbing base on the pistol case. We'll move this around now and have a look at the back, take a better look at the pack. Here you can see the back of the equipment set, and specifically the pack. Now this is a really good design in my opinion, certainly better than say the haversack perhaps from the 1937 pattern. It's taller and distributes the weight more along the length of the back, which as we now know is a better way of carrying loads. It's not short and squat, so it distributes the load a little better. And it can be worn more comfortably without the rest of the equipment. I've tried this loaded, and actually it's quite comfortable to wear. I would say more so than say the 1937 pattern pack, or well the 1908 pack or the 1937 pattern haversack. Quite a neat design. I like it. You do have a strap up here which is designed to take the D-shaped mess tins in their carrier, so that will buckle onto the outside here. A neat place to carry them. And obviously you do have the external stowage as well with the strap, so you can carry a rolled up load around the outside. And there's a good bit of volume in here. Volume wise it's less, I would say, than the 1908 pack. I haven't actually measured to get the volume, which I probably will do when I do this in more detail. However, it is still a decent size. It is just an empty void inside, so it can be packed out as you will. There's no dividers or anything. But as I say, quite a neat design, and I as I say, believe carried over pretty much from the Belgian web equipment set, which predated this. As I say, a neat design. I think, as I say, this was also intended for use, or a version of this was also intended for use with the officers' equipment, the Mills officers' equipment. So that's the pack on the back there. On the right hand side of the web equipment here, we can see the water bottle in its carrier. Now this obviously is something which would be perpetuated with 1937 pattern, slightly modified in British service in having the two short straps and a press stud linking them at the top here, rather than having the press stud on the front. This of course this particular design will be perpetuated in Canadian manufacture. Some confusion. Some people consider this to be early issue 1937 pattern. It's not. The British issue, British manufactured 1937 pattern from the outset had a press stud at the top, linking two short sections of strap rather than having one strap which comes over and buttons at the front. So this is the 1919 pattern bottle carrier, as with previous designs, as with the 1908, designed to go on the brace ends there. So you have obviously now just the narrower 1-inch straps as opposed to the 2-inch straps of the 08 web equipment. So as I say, basically a design taken from that, this perpetuation of Mills' skeleton water bottle carrier, and obviously with the blue enamel water bottle in there. Otherwise, there's not much else to see on this side. We'll just talk now about the components which are missing from this equipment set. We'll talk now about the two components which are missing from this. The first of which is the haversack, which is of course missing off the left hip. From the front profile, it looks very similar to other haversacks in British use, so a flap with two small straps coming down. The back is very different because of the way it attaches onto the back of the equipment when worn on the back. but otherwise it has the buckle on each side to attach the brace ends and can be worn at the hip when worn in full marching order like this. If you want to see photographs of that, I recommend going and look at Khaki Web, which is a very good resource for British web equipment. I'll put a link to that in a pinned comment down below. The other component which is missing from this, it rather shows the interesting design philosophy that went behind this. This is for the time period a very up-to-date, modern set of web equipment, using the best technology of the time in terms of design and design philosophy and so forth. But it included a cutlass frog. Now, obviously, you're not likely to be carrying a bayonet with this equipment as it stands because it's a pistol equipment. But a designed part of the equipment was the ability to carry a cutlass in a frog, which was similar to the 1908 pattern bayonet frog, but slightly enlarged. And that could be carried on the left hip, obviously behind the haversack if the haversack was being carried on the hip. Rather archaic piece of design philosophy for the time. 1919, by the end of the First World War, the idea of using cutlasses in boarding actions and so forth is really something of the past. Perhaps useful to have a bit of cold steel on the hip in colonial policing actions, maybe, if nothing else than as a visual deterrent. But beyond that, certainly, I think rather outdated thinking. But it was a part of the design. So those two missing components, hopefully I'll be able to pick up at some point. As I say, unfortunately, the thing with this equipment is the components for it are relatively rare. It wasn't made in huge quantities like 1937 pattern, certainly not in the same quantities, and it became outdated and was then scrapped and used up and burned out for brasses and all the other things that happened to web equipment, which became obsolete. So that is the unfortunate thing with it. However, they did make enough of it for bits and pieces to be out there. So hopefully at some point I'll pick up a cutlass frog and a haversack. Haversack is top on the list because it's not absolutely necessary to have the cutlass frog. Cutlasses weren't commonly carried. There is another 1919 pattern web equipment set. This is obviously the naval web equipment designed for use by the Royal Navy. The Mills Company also had a commercial 1919 pattern which was designed as a rifle equipment, and this is actually shown in naval documents at the time as an option for assembling the equipment as a rifle equipment. However, much of it is actually different. You have cartridge carriers at the front, a different back piece, you have a bayonet frog, you have an entrenching tool carrier and so forth, which is different from all of this equipment here. So although it shared some components, it was actually quite different in many of the design features. Again, if you want to look at that, there's information on Khaki Web in the 1919 pattern naval web equipment section. It also details the rifle equipment. As I say, it's odd that it was included in naval manuals at the time. It's possible the Royal Navy considered introducing it, but then didn't. They certainly stuck with 1908 pattern as a rifle equipment right through into the middle years of the Second World War, when 1937 pattern was introduced as basically the tri-service standard web equipment. So the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy and the Army would all use 1937 pattern from that point on. So that is a look, as I say, to get back to this, that's a look at the Royal Navy's 1919 pattern pistol equipment, and as I say, hopefully one day I will have this complete and we'll be able to do a full run through of it as a complete set of webbing. I hope you found that interesting. As I always say, if you have and you'd like to support the channel, I do have a Patreon page which several people have very kindly contributed to. I have several patrons now, and obviously there's actually enough now that they will be voting on next month's Mannequin of the Month. Given several choices, there'll be a poll on that. So if you're interested in checking that out, link in the description. There's also a PayPal link where you can donate, make a one-time donation if you'd like to, if you feel you'd like to support my videos in that way. I am also greatly appreciative of people subscribing. So if you do find this stuff interesting, please do consider subscribing. And make sure you hit the little notification button, the little bell, which will notify you when I upload future videos. There's also a Facebook and an Instagram page where I post photographs of the collection, I answer questions there, and there's generally a bit of discussion and so forth which goes on there as well, which is always good. So check those out. Links to Facebook and the Instagram page as well, both in the description. But that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. So until next time, bye for now.